Okay, cool. So this is a quick lightning talk on the improved data frame handling semantics that we are proposing. So let me jump straight through it. We are going to talk about why we're doing this, what we are proposing, and then questions from or suggestions and ideas from the audience. So if you have worked with the flight schema object at all, you may notice there are a couple limitations, or specifically one limitation around the ability to use non-primitive column types. And that's something that's hasn't been a super major issue with their users, but it is a kind of a strange limitation to have. And it is somewhat indicative of lack of maturity, possibly. So hoping to address that. And then at least for me, when I was writing extension code, it seemed like there may be a better API, like a more user-friendly API. So we're basically exploring whether that is possible. So the world that we want to get to is something that looks like this. So the top example, you can still, just one thing bigger, you can still take in, not in this case, but you can still take in and return simple pandas data frames or any other data frames, including custom data frame libraries if you wrote one. And in the bottom example, if you are using a data frame that doesn't have column or schema behavior, you can annotate it either by supplying fields, which is kind of the existing keyword types framework. Notice there are more complex types here now, or using possibly an arrow schema or any other schema for which Flytekit understands. If you want non-default behavior for your data frame type, you have to use the wrapper object called StructureDataSet. This is a new object that we would introduce that can wrap any data frame and allow the user to specify additional behavior, specifically around the storage protocol like S3, GCS, which would be derived from the URI and a format. And we're going to maintain the existing syntax of giving the wrapper class the Python type that the user would like to see, and then either an all or an iter, depending on whether you want to receive everything or if the underlying transformer supports iteration. So implementation into IDL, this is the main change that we're going to make. Feel free to take a look at the PR if you need, but basically adding a new type where there is a repeated set of basically name and sub-literal type tuples, adding a format, which I believe is new, and then an external schema. This is where if you had used the arrow syntax, that's where this would go. With respect to contributions and extensions, this is the UX that we are proposing. So instead of having to deal with the schema engine and the type engine, everything is basically will be written in two interfaces, two concrete classes, an encoder and a decoder. They are only registered with the very long named StructureDataSet transformer engine, and that engine will be the one that actually registers with those Python types with the type engine itself. User signatures are just always the raw Python type, the data frame type, or the new StructureDataSet type. And the encoder and decoder that is used is deterministically picked by the engine based on three things: the storage protocol, the format, and the Python data frame type. Let's see here. So basically, if the user just returns the data frame type, then you get the default behavior. If you want to customize that behavior, or if you want like lazy downloading or iteration, then you have to use the new object. And the reason we started this a while back, the reason it took so long is because we spent a long time trying to play around with whether or not it was possible to add intermediate formats, i.e. make the conversion to and from Python and Flight like 2 steps, so that contributors might be able to just write something that serializes to like an error record batch or something, and then Flytekit would handle the rest of it. But it was too, we couldn't find a good contributor experience for that. So after some thinking, we just went back to the original design. There is a POC implementation on Flytekit at StructureDataSet proposal. Thank you, Kevin, for writing that. And basically going through that PR, you will see these guys. So these are what you would need to implement to contribute a new transformer for a new data frame type. So obviously we'll have Spark and Pandera and Pandas and all the usual stuff. But you basically need to write an encoder which takes in one of these new Python objects and returns one of the new literal objects. And the decoding is the same thing. Note here that you can return either the data frame or a generator of the data frame. So depending on whether or not your decoder supports iteration. And the engine handles the rest of it. So it handles registration with the type engine, registration of handlers, picking the encoder and decoder, and then derivation of the Flight literal type. So it will go through the annotations and figure out what the columns are and the external schema, if any. We are going to leave Flight schema as is for now, so users can continue to use it. I think we may try to either update all the plugins or figure out a way to use the current transformers as handlers within the new framework. But the Flight schema support will remain for the time being. And the POC isn't entirely done, so assuming that there's no major changes, major complaints from today, or issues that are unforeseen as yet, we are hoping to be done with it by the end of this month, and then we'll probably release it Jan/Feb next year. And there's also backend changes that need to happen in line with that. The doc is still a work in progress. Once it is cleaned up a little bit more, we'll make an RFC link for it, but there were too many comments to reasonably use HackMD for this one. And I think that is it, yeah. Questions?
No, that's pretty cool, and I think a pretty flexible API. Are we going to ship in? Apologies if you have answered that already. What extensions are we going to ship with, like out of the box, that uses this?
I think everything that, like, I think we'll try to write everything that is there today. So we'll see how difficult that is, but at the very least, Pandera, Spark, Pandas, I think Dolt is doable. Yeah.
Nice.